Hello, my name is Michael Smith, and this is one in a series of short videos to explain the basics of procedural textures, to hopefully explain some of the other procedural texture things I'm doing in my longer videos. What we've done so far is we've talked about what a procedural texture is, we've talked about texture coordinates, and we've looked at two examples of texture coordinates, UV coordinates and generated coordinates. Now we're going to look at object coordinates. The way that we're going to do that, so we're starting out in our default window in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and click on shading. I'm going to go to this object and I'm going to add a texture to it. So I'm going to go to add texture, wave texture. I'm going to plug this in here. I'm going to change from bands to rings. And what this produces is a tree ring texture where you can see we have the rings on one end, the edges of the rings, and then the ring on the other end here. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and add input texture coordinates. And for now, I'm going to select generated, which is the one we're familiar with. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select this object, Shift D to duplicate X along the X axis, Y along the Y axis instead. Move it over here. And now what I'm going to do is click back on the first one, and I'm going to change this material. So first, I'm going to go here to copy the material, this little duplicate. Now it's called material 001. The other copy is still material. This is material 001. And I'm doing that so we can keep one in generated and change the other to object so I can explain the difference. So you're going to notice two things, I hope. First, one, the scale sure looks different here. It looks like the rings are closer together. And two, the center of the circle has now moved up. Instead of being at the bottom corner, it's in the center. Why is that? So the way I'm going to show you, I'm going to go up here to the Layout tab. And then we can't see the texture. I'm going to go up here to the top right, and I'm going to select Viewport Shading so we can see it again. Okay, so hopefully this helps to maybe understand what's going on, which is here, if you remember from generated, the coordinates are based on the bounding box of the object with a 0, 0 corner and a 1, 1 corner. So no matter how we scale this, it's going to take the bounding box, and it's going to map those coordinates from 0, 0 to 1, 1 along the edges of that bounding box. What we do with object coordinates, however, is we just take the global coordinates of the point in the global space. Sort of. I'll explain a caveat to that in a minute. And you can tell this because now, previously, the rings were centered on the bottom edge, which makes sense because 0, 0 is going to be in a bottom corner. Now they're centered in along the x-axis, which makes sense because that's where the 0, 0 is in the global space. The other issue, why are there more rings closer together? Well, this will scale, this generated coordinates will scale from 0 to 1 no matter the size. And if we look at the grid, it's actually a 2 by 2 cube, 2 by 2 by 2. So it's stretching this out over 2 by 2 by 2. In the object coordinates, it's looking at the actual space, the object space in the global space. And so it's actually going 2 by 2 by 2. So it's going to be twice as compact as the other one. So we can show that this is what's happening by going into edit mode here. So I'm going to select the object with object coordinates and press tab to go into edit mode. Now I'm actually editing the geometry of the object. And if I do that, let's go up to the top left. We'll click select faces. I'm going to select with my left mouse one of these faces, G for grab, Y for y-axis. And you can see as I move the face, all that's happening is we're, again, just using the global coordinates. So I'm just seeing more of these set of rings that are centered around the x-axis. If I select all with A and I scale up, for instance, same thing happens. If I press G, sorry, scale being S, if I press G for grab and Z and I move this around, as I move the object, you can see that the texture is rolling off of it. The one possibly confusing exception, if you're new to Blender here, I'm going to press escape tab to go back into object mode, is if I select the object, press G for grab and Z for Z, the texture doesn't move. The reason for that is that when you do that, you aren't actually changing the vector coordinates, the vertex coordinates of the object. Those are still the same for the purpose of this texture. And then after you've built the object and applied the texture, you're translating the entire thing. We can see that if I do G for grab, Z, move it. Now I go to object, I go to apply, and I apply location. This is going to take the transform on the object and actually change the vertices. Now you can see the object coordinates move to where they should be based on where the x-axis is. So that's the difference between generated coordinates and object coordinates. I hope that's been useful. Thanks.